Hello students. This is the second lecture of our flipped classroom series. Being that it's in front of a PowerPoint in the classroom like normal, I thought that we would start off with some calm classroom just to, get the whole classroom experience. So we're going to do bell focus, which you know is one of my favorites. Here we go. Feel your feet flat on the floor and straighten your back. Close your eyes. Rest your hands in your lap. I'm just kidding. We're not going to be calm classroom. Anyway, welcome to the second lecture. We are introducing nonlinear narratives today. This is the first official lecture of the flipped classroom. When you finish this lecture, please click on the link below and take the quiz. Let's get started. So, introducing nonlinear narratives. Nonlinear narrative, by definition, is a disjointed or disorganized narrative. A narrative is just the professional, official word for story. Examples of a nonlinear narrative can include having the events be out of order, having parallel stories, having dream sequences, and having stories in stories. So we can already see several of these in Going After Cacciato, the out of order, the dream sequences, and the stories within a story. All of them are in Going After Cacciato, making it a prime example of a nonlinear narrative. Nonlinear narratives are not new, though. A nonlinear narrative has really been around, actually, since about the 8th century BC, when Homer wrote his two epic novels, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad starts in the middle of the action, which is called in media res, which you've probably heard before. That's an important word, though. This has been going on since the 8th century BC, so 800 years before the arrival of Christ, according to the Bible. We've been using nonlinear narratives in some form or another. All of this begs the question of why. Humans love to tell stories. Civilization, you could argue, is built on stories. We talked in Song of Solomon about the power of myth and of fable and of legends with heroes in quest. Human beings love to tell stories. But if every story just has the beginning and then the middle and then the end, that gets really, 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 really boring. And so part of it is our natural desire to be telling stories in new ways, to be entertaining and engaging the audiences. There is the novelty aspect of it, which is it makes it unique, it makes it memorable, and it also, actually, some people have said, it mimics, that means to copy, human memory. Where if you start telling a story, you may remember halfway through the story some other point that you need to bring up. You might remember some other story that this reminds you of. Your mind does not work in a linear fashion, but your mind makes associations and jumps and doubles back on itself and makes other connections. And trying to get that into a story means you're not going to tell a straightforward beginning, middle, end story. Those are the two main reasons for it. We could talk on and on about why authors use it. Contemporary usage. Nowadays, you see a lot of authors doing this, Tim O'Brien being one. Contemporary usage, authors are using nonlinear narratives in order to convey information about their characters' mental states. And so by having a broken narrative, a fragmented, a disjointed narrative, authors are using this to talk about their own characters. A question I would like for you guys to consider and answer this question in your notes, please title it question and then answer it, is what does a nonlinear narrative suggest about a character's mental state? How does a disjointed narrative add to our understanding of a character? How does it change our understanding of a character? Please answer this question in your notes. I'm going to look for this answer in your notes. Please title it, answer, some way that it's easily identifiable, please. In Going After Cacciato, talking about our nonlinear narratives now, we actually have 3 stories that Cacciato, or that Paul Berlin is telling us, excuse me. There is Paul's night in the observation post, and that is our top level narrative. That is the present time in our story. While Paul is telling us that story, though, we are also hearing the story of his arrival in Vietnam, and joining 3rd Squad. There is that narrative as well. And then the last narrative that is told is 3rd Squad's pursuit of Cacciato to Paris. This one, this last one, this blue one right here, I hope you can see it's blue. This is our dream sequence that we talked about back on the first slide. This is our story within a story that's not actually happening. This is a story being told out of order, and this is our traditional narrative. You'll notice every observation post gives a very clear indication of the time, pulling us through in a very linear fashion, where these other 2 stories are kind of looping backwards constantly or telling a dream which isn't actually real. So those are the 3 stories that are in Going After Cacciato, and obviously we're going to talk more about them. Most of our work based off this lecture is going to be understanding how these stories fit together. All right, are you ready for the confusing part? I hope so. Paul is telling the story from the observation post after he has already killed Cacciato. If you were in class on Tuesday, we got to that point in the story. That's where chapter 1 and chapter 46 run back into each other, and we learn that Paul has already killed Cacciato. The story of Going After Cacciato is his attempt to imagine a scenario where he doesn't have to kill a fellow soldier. That's why he imagines Cacciato escaping to Paris. That's why they go after him and they keep going and keep going, because Paul is telling us this story, trying to make it actually a reality. While Paul is telling the story, we're given flashbacks of his arrival in Vietnam to give us more background into the soldiers, into 3rd Squad, into their decisions, into their actions, because that plays an important part as well. And then finally, Paul's imagined story has the same ending as the actual event. That suggests numerous things. The same ending, obviously, is killing Cacciato. It doesn't matter if it was on the mountaintop or in the hotel room in Paris or apartment in Paris. He cannot escape that he has done this, and this is this connection. This story loops back around and brings him back to that point that he was trying so desperately hard to avoid. That is the confusing parts. These will be talked about in greater detail, but that is the rough approximation of the nonlinear narrative. Paul's attempt to envision a future where he doesn't kill the soldier who befriends him is unsuccessful. Ultimately, Paul is unsuccessful. His fantasy of Cacciato escaping to a place where war hasn't touched is not a reality. It is a dream, it is a fantasy. So, we still have questions that we will answer as a class. We are not addressing them in this presentation, but they are questions that I want you thinking about. Why does Cacciato run away? We can't forget that Cacciato actually does run away. The beginning of the story, chapter 1, is real. That is the real level of the story. Cacciato runs away and Third Squad goes after him. We need to figure out why. What do Paul's actions show us about soldiers? This is a more symbolic question. This is dealing with what is Tim O'Brien trying to get us to think about. Paul's actions, whether they were intentional or unintentional, tell us something about him and therefore about soldiers. And then we haven't talked much about this name, but the name Paul Berlin is very important in terms of both of its names, Paul and Berlin. Please, in your notes, do a little bit of research. Open up a new browser window, go to Wikipedia, and research Paul from the Bible. And Berlin, Germany. Go off, research those things. This is another piece that I'm going to look for. So I'm looking for you answering that question. I'm looking for you doing this research. You need to have those components to get full credit for these lecture notes. That is the end of our nonlinear narrative presentation. We talked about what a nonlinear narrative was, how long it's been around, examples of things that make a nonlinear narrative. We talked about the nonlinear narrative within Going After Cacciato, briefly outlined what those there are three strands of the story are, and then I gave you some more questions to think about. This is just a very brief introduction to Going After Cacciato. After you finish watching this video, please go take the quiz, and then I look forward to our work in class. Thank you guys. Have a good night.